Zoom. Live stream is slow this morning, much like all of us.
Nothing wrong with that.
Maybe we'll just upload it afterwards. Yep, here we go. Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Zoom and in the room. Before we fully get going, does anyone have any revisions to the notes that were sent out? I also want to do a quick note that we learned on. Yes, steel chair. No worries. That we learned on Friday that the date of our town council workshop is being pushed into March. So it'll be on March 5th and not February 19th. The council double booked. So we'll plan on March 5th for the town council workshop to present the open space plan, which is fine. It gives us a little bit more time to make final edits and things like that.
That's good.
So the agenda went out with notes from the last meeting and also the public comments that we received on the plan. And our team from Viewshed was able to incorporate some of the revisions suggested or address some of the comments. And that was resent over the weekend. So hopefully everyone had a chance to take a look at it. And I will turn things over to Judy and Madeline at this point.
Sure. I guess we should, hard to know exactly where to start, but I guess the place to start would be with the comments, and if any of you, we could go down through them all, but since you've all had them.
Yeah.
I guess I would ask if you have any questions about the comments that we received, or want to discuss any of them further. We
can also go through them.
we categorize, we
just
categorize them, and
categorization.
so you can see,
In red are ones that we, when we were discussing them with Jamie and Autumn.
Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, if you could share your screen, yeah, that's.
Okay, so the comments in red, are the ones that when we were discussing them with Autumn and Jamie, we flagged so that we could discuss them more and, potentially make edits based on those. And, let's see, then the purple are all comments relating to the disc golf location. I think that there are a lot of people who wanted the town to try to secure the location for conservation. So there are a lot of comments about that specific
Space, yeah, okay.
yeah. And then in blue were comments that related to concerns about cost specifically and finances and making that clear in the plan. And then green were comments that were, you know, we like the plan, kudos, we
Okay.
support this, general supportive comments. And then in gray were comments about people disagreeing with the premise of the plan, or we're wanting to control development.
but they weren't specific to
But they
the
weren't
plan
specific to the
itself,
plan.
so there wasn't
Yes.
any edit that we could make.
It's not action, a lot of action items.
So the things that we made edits were mostly in the pink at the beginning, so the first sets of comments. And most of those were small text changes, so you know, like around cost, we made some changes where we like tried to just re-emphasize the fact that the town wasn't intending to purchase all the land outright, that it,
Yeah.
we were, you know, that we were recommending that the town look for grants and bonds and that the land could be donated and other things like that. So we re-emphasized that a little bit in the text. Just to make sure that that was something that was clear.
We added in the intro some language about, you know, this being an investment for the long-term health of the town and making that clear that it could save the town money in the long run. And also that like a few things to sort of reemphasize, like the values of this plan is protecting like clean air and water and how that could benefit the town.
Yeah, so most of the changes weren't substantive, particularly in terms of, you know, changing anything in the plan. Where people pointed out that maybe we could, you know, make sure to point out that something was there and we felt like the things we all heard from the committee, we just tried to, you know, add those words in.
Okay,
So those are really the only changes that we made after the public comment. If you all had read through those and thought that there was something that we particularly needed to do, then that's what we'd want to know.
I was just gonna ask about the comment at the bottom of page 8, which talks about concerns about trails and road safety.
Yep.
So I don't know if that needs more clarification or,
I think when we discussed.
I don't have a suggestion. for
Yeah,
it,
yeah, when we
but
discussed
just-
that one, we thought that those comments are actually probably more related to the trail plan and or the transportation plan, and so we will forward those comments on to that group, because this plan is not particularly specific about trails and or road safety, but there are groups looking at that, so if there's comments that fit into some other plan, we are gonna forward those comments on to that
Okay.
group.
It might be worth just making sure we say that. I think we do somewhere in the plan, you know,
Yeah.
what the purpose
But
of
there's
this
other-
is,
yeah.
but.
Yeah, and I think one of the first kind of action items that staff are hoping to address, because it does relate to this and a number of other initiatives that we've been working on, is a trails master plan. And so we could, in the recommendation or the strategy related to that, we could say, consider safety of
Yeah.
of trails.
Yeah.
It seems low hanging fruit and.
Yeah.
so I didn't, one of my concerns is basically that the implementation of this, sort of like, so I know we have that table, says who's gonna do what, but is there some sort of either committee that can take the lead in either reviewing the plan, so that sort of like, it doesn't just become sort of atomized, and there's no coming back every once in a while to say, how are we doing? Because we're relying on things like developing impact fees, ordinances, the Trails Master Plan. So I don't know if there's a way to
Yeah.
sort of give, I don't want to put more on staff, or maybe a committee like the Parks Land Conservation Board can say, come back every year and say, how are we doing implementation? What, you know?
Yeah.
Something like that. So there's some sort of nucleus and follow on. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't just get sort of.
Yeah, or the conservation.
Or the Conservation Commission, right?
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
Maggie had a recommendation that maybe like once or twice a year, the Conservation Commission and the Parks and Conservation Land Board may meet jointly to kind of talk
Perfect.
about what the groups are working on. And kind of reviewing the open space plan and progress towards implementing the open space plan could be part of that meeting as well. And as the rep from Parks and Conservation Land Board, Doug, like, what are your thoughts on?
Well, you know, the council can change our charge anytime. The town council would have to change the charge of Parks and Conservation Land Board to do additional stuff to what they already do. But our role is not to create trails.
Right.
Our role is not to go looking for land to buy.
No, I'm
We're not
saying,
allowed-
it's not about saying,
Well,
looking
you're
at the open space plan and
You're
saying,
talking about running a trails, but, you know, actually being involved in establishing and running a trails program
mhm,
for Scarborough, and that's huge. And it's huge. I mean, you guys all do this. I mean, the incredible amount of time, that's not a volunteer group.
Maybe I can help you guys. This is Autumn, sorry. So the town council has their goals that they're actually going to be talking about tomorrow night. And they're more generic as far as review and accept open space plan and set priorities. And so then what'll come out of that is town manager and staff the idea is to get together and come up with our next steps, and then we'll funnel that down to the work of the committees this year. And then at the end of the year, in 2025, there's a committee meeting to say, hey, here's the next steps and implementation that we should be looking at. So for me, one of the capital improvement plan items that I'm going to put in my FY26 budget from this is a trails master plan. So I'm going to request that. I don't know if I'll get that approved, but that's sort of how we're looking at it. So we're trying to take it from the council goals being more broad in scope, and then staff and administration figuring out what are our next steps, and then using the committees to really help us get those things accomplished on a very timely manner, and then following up at the end of the year to say, what's next for next year? Because I think we can get really overwhelmed if we just go, look at all of these things we have to do. What can we chip away at?
Yeah, I was talking more about a review of how the town is doing in implementing the open space plan, not you actually developing a trails and being
What?
responsible. for it.
I think that's all part of it though, Chrissy,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we do the work, and then it's really, I mean, a committee could review it, but it really falls on staff to say, this is what we've accomplished as to the implementation of this plan.
And my concern was that we're just all aligned in this, not necessarily programmatically on the ground, but just all aligned in our goals and because I've just seen so many instances where everything's siloed. Well, that's the trail committee. We don't have anything to do with that. And that's do you know what I mean? So it's all about moving the conservation needle. And that's.
Well, I think that's why what I'm trying to explain is we have to take it from a top down instead of a bottom up approach. And that's what happens sometimes when the committees are in their silo. They have these great ideas. So we're trying to sort of flip that, and this will be a great one because it does touch so many committees.
So it's gonna be staff driven.
Staff driven, and then committee, review and input and helping with engagement and those sort of things. Yeah. But a lot of these projects are projects that will, like the Trails Master Plan, that's a project that will have to go out for another consultant to actually combine the work from the Transportation Committee and that assessment, this work, and then put it together and have, a lot more input. That's not something like Jamie and I are going to be doing on our own.
Right.
I know, you got, if you're on Zoom, you can't hear, it's really loud in the room next door.
Well, and they're all laughing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, my concern is that, there's some follow through, and just for staff to check in with, and there'd be an opportunity to say, hey, how are we doing on the open space plan? Where can we help? Where do we need more? Sort of a chance to kind of keep us engaged and helping drive this forward, not to impose something on staff. So.
Yeah, I think you're going to hear about it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. And I will say, staff are the ones that can identify the resources that allow us to implement this plan, because as the tax group has pointed out, it's going to cost a lot of money to fully implement this plan.
Yeah, we're
So-
gonna have to find $300 million plus.
Yeah, so we'll be identifying the low hanging fruit that we may be able to address first, that isn't going to necessarily have as much of a financial burden on the town, and then, or financial impact on the town, and then, look for opportunities where we may be able to bring in grants or something like that for additional conservation, and obviously working with Scarborough Land Trust for
Right.
that as well.
Correct.
And I've been really heartened by the fact that the land bond passed, the fact that the wetlands setback,
Barely survived, yeah.
So many, what was that?
Just kidding.
That it survived.
Barely
Survived.
survived.
So, there is a good feeling towards keeping the conservation as.
And the thing is,
Offset.
there are various tools. I mean, the plan does talk about developing an impact fee, so, you know.
Yeah.
So there are tools that are going to be in development that will help, you know, provide some sources of recurring funding.
You know, as we talk about this, it's really important to understand that this isn't new to Scarborough. Scarborough's been through this before. We did an open space plan and we implemented some pieces of it for the same reason, just.
Right.
Only certain things from this plan are going to get done. The question is, are just a few things done and then we go away? Or do we keep moving on them? You know, it's not a matter, you can't take something like this. Honestly, let's be honest with ourselves, and we can't take something like this and say, okay, we're just gonna do all this stuff. But we can say, just like the 30 by 30, we can say it's our goal. And these are the things we want to do, and here's what we can get started on now, and here's what we're going to do later. But there does need to be a plan. There do need to be goals, as you're talking about the 30 by 30 first, you know, are we really going to make that? That's not the point. The point is, we're trying to. And we have an objective, and this gives us objectives with some detailed, you know, activity points, you know, what are we trying to do? These are signposts. If we get here, we can go here, if we get here. And so it's in huge value because of that, but we have to keep treating it as a guide to moving forward. But we also have to keep moving forward. Because once we report to the council on this and they do some things, then everything's kind of on its own and we have to keep things moving.
Well, there's maintaining,
That's what I mean.
yeah, the ongoing, yeah.
But I agree totally that we're in a better place in terms of conservation than I've ever seen. So, and I started getting involved in, you know, before 2000. So it's pretty exciting. And this is a huge piece.
And as Autumn was saying, thinking about it, implementing in phases,
Yes,
you know, through the town council and then trickling down to all of us, is a great way to make sure that it keeps happening.
The hardest
Right.
part is to keep it out.
right. That's what I said. That's my point is I want follow through and some mechanism for follow through. It's sort of for us to keep engaged in how do we work together? How do we engage with each other and which pieces do we want to do first? And then what's next? You know, sort of, for this to be a living plan, you have to have that sort of a re-engagement over time. Otherwise,
Yeah, we don't want it
People-
to sit on our shelf.
yeah, people then get overwhelmed. I mean, staff are overwhelmed already with so many responsibilities and, you know, how do we kind of make sure that it doesn't get left behind? That's all.
Fair, Karen.
Back from the top to sort of the nitpicky detail. So on page 10, where they're talking about dogs in conservation areas. I just want to understand I think most dog owners feel like things are picked up, but what specifically, did we change anything in the plan based on this? Just checking, as some of you may recall, we had a giant kerfuffle when we did banned dogs on the beach, and there was an entire group that was
Oh,
formed,
yes.
and
The dog
lots
people.
of
Yeah, it's
emotional,
having been a Plover monitor, it's
Yeah.
a challenge, and that's
Yeah.
90% of what I did was talk to dog owners.
yeah. Okay, so just don't want to start a war.
Right.
And speaking for all the dog owners who do pick up. That's all right. I'm sure there are people who
I
don't.
can't
have them.
actually, you know, read all these comments. Were there comments about I didn't see them in any detail. Were there comments about the data collection recommendations? What pages?
There weren't any
32?
comments about data at all.
No comments about that, good. Well, you know, it's funny, we were just talking about how we keep this moving forward. Well, this page, data collection, lists the things we have to do on a regular basis to keep this moving. And they're critical, and they're wonderful, and we dropped the ball on a bunch of these first time around, I can tell you. I'm not faulting anybody, we could only do so much, I guess. But the bottom line is, this is a very good list recommending how to keep things moving. Lays out the timelines every 5 years, every year. So we really should emphasize to the council that this be looked at as, because unfortunately, everybody looks at implementation, they look at, you know, are the trails safe? Well, you know, that's great, but that's step two, right? Step one is, do we know where the trails are, right? You know, so it's, and this lays out that sort of thing. This concept of every 5 years review and incorporate new data is fantastic. And that does suggest that committees or groups of committees with staff, be working at keeping us moving in this direction. You know, members of various committees with staff getting together as a group, maybe an open space group that keeps meeting. And, you know, different people can cycle into that, but we keep it going and we keep focused on keeping the data up to date.
Do you want to add a recommendation that council consider creating an open space group that meets yearly?
No.
No, okay. Just asking. I was just gonna say that was made up of representatives of existing committees, so not asking more volunteers, but
I think.
you wanna just create that if you need it.
Yeah, or if anything, that there is an effort for the related committees to meet on
To
an
do that
annual
on their own.
basis,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, or
But
do
we
you,
don't need a whole separate group for that.
Yeah. do you wanna make one of the recommendations be that there be a report to council on a yearly basis as to the progress of the open space report? So that information goes out to in a public way as to where things are? I'm just asking if that's like,
Yeah, I mean, we put together an annual report each year and it could be a piece of the annual report.
Yeah.
It was just submitted last week, our
Yeah.
individual department pieces, so.
do you wanna put that formally into the plan, or do you want to just assume that will? just be
Someone
covered?
needs ownership. and
Yeah, I was
that's
gonna
what's being
say.
Bad
recommended.
idea.
Yeah,
Hey, Jamie, I
Ownership.
have to leave for the other meeting and then I'll be back, but I do
Okay.
like that idea of just including it.
in the
In the
annual.
annual report, yeah.
I would also wouldn't mind some sort of bringing related committees to just have a check-in, an annual check-in at either one of their, you know, joint. Or people are invited to one of the committee's meetings because one of the topics will be, you know, progress on implementation of the open space, you know. Just because I think we can check in and also provide support where the town staff feel they need support moving forward, you know.
Well, and it might be nice, I think we had kind of talked about this offline, but creating some sort of dashboard that can help
Right.
us track progress.
Right, I mean, that's another option, is that we could take the implementation table and create an online, you know,
Dashboard.
location where any group can come and look and see, here's the table, here's who's responsible for different tasks, and are they, you know, is it being implemented, you know, is
Yeah,
it
so this thing,
addressed, yeah, that thing.
yeah, that's what, I'd like
And
to
just
see this
putting
filled
that
in, yeah.
on So that all the committees have access to it and can look at it, and then know if something's being addressed. And you could add another column to it, like, you know, would like to meet, you know, or something, you know, like you could add something to it about a
Right,
way to say, hey, you know, we'd like to talk to somebody about this.
Yeah.
You know, or a way to contact Jamie and say, we're thinking about this one, we want to make sure to talk to this group because they also are peripherally involved, you know, so, but that way they could see that these 3 groups might be involved in this one. We're thinking we might want to take it on, that way you know what other groups are involved, and then you can talk to Jamie, like, but we could put all that information available on a website.
I wouldn't mind something so that people have a little bit of a map to,
Yeah,
okay, who's gonna take the lead on certain pieces? Even if they're gonna be phased and they're not gonna be taken up immediately, eventually who's, you know, who's responsible for what? Or what streams or what portions are they gonna take the lead on?
Yeah, and I think part of this effort was identifying our baseline where we are now.
Right.
Because we didn't have good systems in place to track that, and so putting together a better tracking system and making that easily accessible online so that anytime, you know, a piece of the town acquires a piece of property, or Scarborough Land Trust acquires a piece of property, that's being fed into.
Right, into the.
Yeah, and so, and the
dashboard.
map is being updated so that we can kind of see progress over time. And then some of the other just kind of strategies,
So that's essentially data collection on an ongoing basis.
Right.
Right.
yeah.
So who's responsible for that in the town?
So we do have a GIS person who kind of maintains all of that data, but we need, and we've talked about this at a previous meeting, a good system to get the information fed to him so that the updates will happen. So that will be kind of an internal, task that staff need to work on to develop that process, both working with assessing Scarborough Land Trust, our GIS person, so that we are able to get that information, updated correctly and timely, so that we do have a good, kind of account of open space.
But who's responsible?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be the planning,
Who's the
it'll be the
owner?
planning department, because they're the
Planning.
ones that are, most of the kind of designated open space that the town deals with happens during development. So a subdivision is going in and X amount of that property is going to be maintained as open space. So we need a mechanism to get that from planning and assessing, because it has tax implications, so assessing has a role in that, to our GIS. And we just, at this point, up until this point, haven't had a good system. I will say probably the past 2 years, it's been much better, but it was kind of going back in time to, when a lot of these subdivisions were developed back in the 80s and 90s, that we didn't have a good system for getting, for accounting for that land. And this process has done a lot of that.
So the Parks and Land, I can't, PCLB, I always get the words mixed up all the time. We have a fact sheet, that isn't an annual fact sheet that we've developed that says all the things that that committee's doing and has accomplished. And I'm wondering if there is something, I know your annual report is to the town council. It's probably text driven.
It doesn't have to be, but
Yeah.
the departments have flexibility on how it's presented.
Well, I'm just thinking what, Doug was saying that, he's never seen, there's so much interest in conservation now that, it's heartening. I'm just wondering if maybe the Conservation Commission takes this on, back to the data, but that there's an annual, this is what's happened with our open space. And this is how we're moving it, so there's a fact sheet or something that can be distributed. It's educational, but it's also communications.
Yeah, and there have been, I know, Tom Hall would like to see some sort of like thermometer or some other graphic showing progress towards 30 by 30.
Yeah, that'd be
Um,
great. I love that.
Yeah, and so,
If we set up a website that has this stuff on it, we can have like we can have a meter that shows where you
Like a
are.
little dial,
And then
that,
you
a little pie chart
Yeah,
type thing,
yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense.
so yeah,
You
just-
can have infographics on there
Yeah.
that say that, and I think, I know we've pulled together the conservation lands. But I think, I've worked with other towns in which there's probably stuff you wanna add to that, right? Now that you have that baseline, right, like year purchased and, we have in there whether it's an easement or, we have
Exactly,
some
right,
data in there, but we
right.
don't have all the data in there.
Yeah.
And in order to maintain that as really good data, you probably want to start filling in those fields over time. And that might be a committee might want to take that on as, fill in the
Somebody
data.
needs to be responsible for that all by itself, just
Right.
maintaining the open space map.
Yeah.
What is protected of the various types, the various places, and honestly, that's not, that's not something that Mike can do on his own. I mean, he's amazing, but he's being pulled in,
Yeah.
every direction possible because of the huge demand for GIS services. So a big question here is who is going to be responsible, not for necessarily doing it, but for making sure that we have an online viewer of open space data for use by town committees, for example. That's 3.6 on the data thing. That's a very big deal. I'm happy to hear you say that someone would be responsible. I'm a little concerned about that from the standpoint of the planning department. But if they can do it, that's great. The question is who owns it.
And I think with this kind of data, like the big hurdle is the past data, right? It's filling in what's existing, because you're not gonna purchase 200 pieces in 1 year, right? Like,
Right,
so filling in 1 or 2 pieces a year that you add in, that's not gonna be the big deal. The big deal is getting the data ready from the past information, and that's always the biggest hurdle, is getting the first set of data
the
ready to go.
baseline,
Once you
yeah.
get that done, then the keeping it maintained is probably something that the GIS person can do fairly easily, because they just need a piece of paper that says, here's the things to fill in, right? Or you can set it up so that planning can just do it, right? Nobody else has to do it. The GIS person doesn't even have to be involved. Because that's your information, planning's information, they have it. They don't need to give it to somebody else, they can just type it in, because it's just attributes at that point. The GIS person puts the parcel in, then the planning can add the attributes in. So I think the question is, like, moving forward, what attributes do you want from the vast number that there can be? You know, there's already databases that you can use, and then you just call out what you don't care about. And then you should start filling them in as you can. And, you know, again, as long as you have what you need to get started, that's great. And then you keep, you know, as there's time available or an intern available or whatever there is to fill in those extra attributes, you start doing it that's usually the way it goes.
Yeah.
You know, or there turns out to be a project that you really want to use it for, you know, then it moves higher on the to-do list and gets done sooner. But I think it's all doable. It does take, you know, some thoughtfulness about the workflow. But it's not.
Yeah, so the baseline's already there through this process. So it's just adding to what we've spent the past year pulling together,
Doing and redoing,
right?
yes.
Other thoughts? Concerns, suggestions?
I'm looking at the education section. Who's gonna take that?
So this was we had a discussion, when we met last week with, Judy and Madeline about, go through the comments and some of the first kind of action items out of the plan, and one of the very first ones is going to be filling out the table of the implementation plan and identifying who's responsible and when it's going to happen and things like that. And first crack at that is gonna be done by staff, with input from council indirectly based on their council goals and things like that. So, that's all stuff that we're gonna need to
So
work
you don't know,
through.
we all know that.
It hasn't been identified
Yeah.
yet.
so the meeting where the town council sets its goals, is that a closed meeting? I'm assuming it's a closed
It
meeting.
happened last weekend
Okay,
or the weekend before.
Cressy, the town council goals, their draft is on the council agenda for tomorrow. So you can see
Okay,
them,
perfect.
they're out there.
okay, great, that's
Yeah,
great,
they're
thank you.
You can see the ones that they talked about in their meeting that were, I'll say 8 pages, and then you can see what they finalized, maybe 4 pages. So you can see the
Okay,
difference. too.
great, wonderful, thank you, that's very helpful.
Yes, and keep in mind that their goals are for a year, so staff is happy to see the 8 pages pared down to 4, because that's a lot to get done in a year.
I know this is, I do have one comment, it's sort of on the, under strategy and ordinance revisions, commercial. So we have 2.5 and 2.6. This is just a thought, you can ignore it or not. I thought it, given all the discussions around that 25-foot setback and the real pushback from developers to even that minimum, I wondered if there's some way to include something that's more like an incentive process. So that they would either get some pass on either an impact fee, or they get some pass on a permit review if they went above and beyond. So I know that because Councilor Hutchins was sort of like flexibility, and I didn't know if there's some way to put in something, you know, maybe a 2.7 there, or another item where there's consideration of some sort of incentive when a commercial development, you know, does, for example, more than a 25-foot setback fee as some sort of, you know, kind of incentive for that. I don't know if there's some sort of incentive structure that or piece that can go in there. That's one thought I had, but I I know it's sort of late in the process, to insert that in there.
It's a great idea, and
Yeah.
it certainly. Even if it never happens,
Right.
it's a nod to saying, we understand everybody's trying to work toward this. and-
Correct,
And let them prove that they have more in there.
correct, because a lot of the, people who are doing, residential, commercial and residential development. And I will take them at their word, they really are committed to conservation, it isn't that they're trying to undermine it, but they want flexibility. So I don't know if there's some way to reward activity goes above and beyond the minimum and to recognize that, hey, we're creating space for you to sort of walk the walk, not just talk the talk,
It's probably a question for Autumn.
I was gonna say, Autumn, do you have thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, Autumn, I hate to put more on your
No,
plate.
it's- Yeah,
No, I mean, we could add something, find opportunities for flexibility, in ordinances. Incentives, I
Yeah.
don't find actually have never done anything in my career for anyone.
Okay, so, okay,
But we can
that's
like,
good to know.
but for like the wetland setbacks, one of the things that we want to work on is, and I alluded to this in my presentation, it's like, hey, maybe I can find some of this space that we might be taking from the wetland setbacks in the front yard setbacks. And so that is opportunities for flexibility. It's not an incentive rather, but it's like, let's address that in our ordinance. So we give.
Yeah, that'd
people-
be great, something alluding to flexibility, because that is something that, was expressed as a demand by, developers that come into Scarborough. And I don't want the message to just to be, we shut you down, I'm like, no.
right.
Oh, sure.
Even, but, so, thank you, I think that would be great.
So Autumn, do you wanna word something the way you want it, or do you want us to take a stab at it?
Oh, you can take a stab at it, just, finding opportunities for flexibility, something like that. Just,
Do it.
I don't want to waive fees or anything like that, so.
I got it, no, I understand, so I'm also concerned about, loopholes, so.
Yeah.
Do you want that under both commercial and residential, or just commercial?
Probably just commercial.
Okay.
And you could even go so far as finding opportunities for flexibility, including reviewing setbacks, height, etc. And then I can check that off my list. That's something I'm doing this year.
Done. Got it.
Like when you make your to-do list and the first
Yeah.
thing to do is make to-do list.
I think you got it right.
I did the to-do list.
Any other comments, thoughts?
On the strategies, we're on strategies right now, we've been doing so, serve land. So in the strategies, there are 7. 1, 1, 3, 1, 7. Those look good. But in the implementation sheet, this is, maybe this has been corrected, but there's 9.
Yeah,
And there's a repeat of a couple of things down the bottom, so I think I don't think 1, 8, 2, and 9 were intended to be.
Okay.
yeah, I think that was just because we edited the
But I
report
like-
and not the implementation sheet.
But I
Yeah.
like 1 through 7, doing 1, 6, and 7 twice.
Yeah.
Asking. The Parks Conservation Land Board will, once this is finalized, we'll take it and look at how our evaluation process for land is matching up with these strategies. And be able to, send a report to the council, what we already do, are gonna modify, how reporting change, whatever, but there's quite a few things here that have to do with evaluating land and looking at land, that sort of thing, so.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be, able to address the issue of looking for funding sources. I mean, we have some of the best, with the land trust, we have some of the best people around for that, so.
Yeah.
When folks from whatever groups, committees, whatever, start looking at that sort of thing, in addition to what we already have, then, you know, the land trust really should be involved.
I won't object to that, so.
Rusty, I don't know, did Andrew provide any comments or thoughts that?
He didn't give me any, he's in Syracuse with his parents, they're having some, you know, health problems, so I don't think he just had a chance.
Okay.
But, you know, I think he would be very supportive of a dashboard where we are maintaining the maps and maintaining, you know, access to, that is something that's, I think high on his priority is that sort of, you know, creating that baseline and then having an ability to then contribute to updating it and maintaining that on a regular basis, I think is pretty important for the land trust generally. And of course, I think they would participate in helping to do that as well.
Great. Any other thoughts or comments about either the comments that we received or the plan itself?
Yeah.
Or do
Like
we
I
think
said-
we're almost ready?
I did receive a comment from a board member who didn't, I said, go on and do it on the online, but she
Yeah.
didn't. She's, like I said, she's worried about implementation and how this, but we talked about this, how we keep, you know, making sure that this doesn't just fall off the radar. And there's, you know, continual, you know, and the filling out that, you know, that matrix for
Yeah.
who's responsible and having
Yeah, that'll be.
having it included in the town annual report and all that. We're talking about things I think addresses that, so.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, I also wanted to talk about, the plan for the town council workshop, so we can start thinking about that. So again, the date for that has been moved to, March 5th, so
What
sorry.
day of the
that-
week is that?
Hmm?
What day of the week? is
It'll
that?
be a Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay.
Yeah, it'll be right before the first town council meeting
It'll be
in
part of
March.
the
Yeah.
usual Wednesday, okay.
And so, typically I think it's, and I guess I haven't done one where we've presented from a consulting plan, but we do rely heavily on the consultants to kind of walk through the process. And the plan, walk through the process and the plan itself. It would be great to have members of the committee there, to, you know, chime in. And there's not typically a lot of public comment at workshops. It's really just a conversation between, kind of those presenting and the town council.
Okay.
So, and it'll be up to the council whether they want to open it up for public comment and things like that. But it's usually pretty informal, but we will, plan to have a presentation for them, kind of walking through what we did, what the outcomes are, and what we see as kind of next steps for implementation.
Yeah, I'm, as a member of this group, I'm most interested in hearing how they see, you know, the town council members, so what their reaction and what they're worried about or enthusiastic about, or, you know, that's,
Yeah.
you know, getting that feedback, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Autumn mentioned, one of their goals that made it through their goals process is, kind of, adopting the plan, and identifying implementation.
Okay.
Opportunities. So, I think that this council is very conservation minded and does care about land conservation in Maine and or in Scarborough, maintaining open space and things like that. And obviously the community is as well, since they voted to pass the land bond, which is really heartening. So, it is a good time to be talking about land conservation, and I think it will be well received. So, we're always gonna have the people saying, how much is this going to cost? I mean, that's definitely something that weighs on the mind of staff also, and everybody sitting around this table, I'm sure. So, and so really hammering home the point that, this is a roadmap. We're probably not going to be able to implement all of the strategies in there, and we're gonna identify the low hanging fruit. and get the biggest bang for the buck, and then look for funding opportunities to help support other aspects, of the plan also.
So Jamie, do you want us to have slides available for the committee to review? For you, it's definitely for you to review, but do you want us to have them for the committee to review before?
I would say it's staff probably is the, primary, because
Okay.
we'll know kind of.
So do
what-
you want us to have those a week or 2 weeks before? What?
We'll
how
need
much time?
everything in the,
That'll be in
available
the packet.
for the packet a week before,
Okay,
so
2 weeks before would be good.
would be good,
So
yeah.
the 19th.
So it is good that we pushed things back.
All right, so we will have slides to you by the 19th.
So is the workshop just a presentation of the report, or does it include any recommendation of first steps
It'll,
at various levels? In other
yeah,
words,
it'll
what-
largely be a presentation of the plan itself, and then we can walk through, kind of what staff feel we can kind of take on as initial first steps, or what kind of staff priorities would be, because this is going to be largely dependent on staff resources to implement.
But what are those things? I mean, you know, I think different folks on this committee might have different attitudes about what the priorities should be. Obviously, the council decides, but I mean, there's things we talked about already today that, you know, this ability to collect the data on an ongoing basis. I mean,
Yeah, setting up the dashboard will be a priority.
Developing.
Autumn already mentioned that she's submitting a capital improvement project for a trails master plan, because we've heard that come out of this and our transportation study, so there's multiple studies pointing to the need for that, which pushes it higher onto the list. And then looking at opportunities, if there's any low-hanging fruit in ordinance updates. Autumn already mentioned the setbacks and things like that, to kind of offset some of the natural resource setbacks that that the town council recently adopted. So Autumn and I will go through and identify where we think we can make progress in the next year.
I'll send it to you, but I'll go through and just on my own, do the same thing. What does Parks and Conservation Land Board process right now already include that's here?
Mhm.
Not that we won't update it to look at the updated maps and to look at the updated priorities and, you know, and land use, et cetera. But, you know, what are we sort of on the way to already in terms of some of the land conservation?
Well, and I've had conversations with Judy and Madeline about kind of taking your evaluation form and putting it into a GIS application, where essentially you can click on the parcel and get the information that Micah has to do manually now. And so that would be useful for your committee, but also useful. Yes, and also useful for the planning department as applications come through, and they may be talking about conserving portions of parcels and things like that. So I see that as being a really valuable thing that that we may be able to, depending on the cost, we may be able to find funding to do sooner rather than later.
It'll be magic.
It will be magic. Judy is a magician with maps.
Okay with me.
So as you're talking, it strikes me that looking through the plan, and you and Autumn would know this, and it may not even be visible to other people. But, there may be infrastructure things that need to be set up before the more visible parts of the implementation can take place.
Yeah.
And that data collection is one of the processes that you need to put in place for that.
Mhm.
And there may be others, the ordinance, a scan of the ordinance. That kind of thing, and, you know, so grouping, I would find it helpful to look through the whole plan with that. Infrastructure lens.
Like internal
Internal
processes versus,
Exactly.
yeah.
Just-
Mhm.
Great.
Autumn, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think we're in a good spot. Do you know for the implementation table, maybe I missed it when I stepped out, are we going to fill that out before the workshop?
I think that we should probably have at least part of it filled out
Okay,
before.
okay. Cause I think
Workshop.
that sounds like what a lot of people are like, what are you guys gonna do? Maybe we don't wanna do what you wanna do. Like, I
So
think
you
once
want us
we
to
get
send
that
you that?
filled out. And that would be a good, probably a talking point for the workshop too, since we usually have at least an hour. You know, the consultants do the introduction and go through the whole process, but then the implementation table, we could present to them and say, this is what we see as, you know, at least the next year moving forward on. I think that'd be good for council to have some feedback on that.
And Autumn, Judy and Madeline are going to send us the implementation schedule as an Excel file so that we can start
Fantastic,
working on filling it out.
perfect.
Something that I might find, I think would be helpful in this table, it says timing, but you may want to say like, you know, divide it into either 5 years or three phases and say, this is gonna happen in phase one,
Or short-term.
short-term,
Yeah, I think
midterm,
that's what
long-term, something like that, just
Short.
because
Yeah.
that way it's clear that you can't chew the whole thing off at the same time. What do you
Yeah.
want to start with, you know,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah, and we'll define in there what short, medium.
Right,
And
you know.
long-term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. And again, a lot of this is going to be funding dependent, so.
Of course, obviously, yeah.
We may find that we even add in a $ column, you know, as we go
Yeah.
through it,
Yeah,
like a money sign.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we often add that column,
Yeah.
the 1, 2,
That matches the
3.
comp plan tables too.
Exactly,
Yeah.
just like that. Yeah. Anything else?
It's beautiful.
It's a lot of hard work, and thank you for all your hard work.
Fun.
Yes, and I was happy to see, we were a little nervous initially when it was getting close to January 15th and there weren't a whole lot of comments. So it's good that we extended it because many of the comments came in after the initial deadline, so.
Now, for March 5th, we need to be there, or is this kind of an internal thing?
It will be helpful to have committee members there. I think that the council likes to see the people who put in the work for the project, so. All of the town council workshops are open to the public, so anybody can be there, but it will be helpful to have committee members.
I do have a question. So let's say that a certain group shows up to, you know, criticize it. What is your feeling about, for example, if I were to sort of stand up and respond as a individual, can I do that or not? Or do you discourage
It
that?
depends on if the council allows public comment on it
Okay.
or not, and
But if they do,
Too much
yeah.
for them to
Well,
want to talk about amongst
some-
themselves, but.
Chrissy, sometimes what happens too, if they don't have comment during the workshop, so maybe we take all the time, they'll do it in general comment, so people speak in that first section of council.
Got
I've seen that happen too.
yeah, I just
might-
sometimes,
If you want to stick around and, you might have to wait for the regular council meeting to start.
no worries. I just, you know, I've just seen this group show up pretty consistently sometimes when they have,
Sure.
probably if they posted something on their website with a criticism, I would just like to have a counterbalance, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is fair.
Okay.
And, you know, I think that they're very focused on how much it's going to cost to achieve 30 by 30, and I think that our message is, this is a roadmap to get us moving in that direction.
Correct.
I don't think anybody really reasonably thinks that we're gonna conserve another 1,700 acres of land in Scarborough in 5 years.
Yeah.
So, but what can we do to set us up to achieve 30% of land conserved in some time period?
Okay.
And if we do have funds, what's the high priority?
Right.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. So I think.
The highest priority is people want to sell their land.
Yeah, that is.
Or opportunity.
You know, the only thing that holds us back, you know, there's funding sources out there, and, you know, our Scarborough Land Trust is amazing at helping with funding on these things. And of course, the town has committed in a serious way, multiple times now, that to conservation, so we're really in a really good place. I mean, you know, how do you convince landowners to sell their land or to sell an easement, you know?
Right.
I will say this, thanks to the way the land trust is staffed now, and thanks to the town supporting the purchase of land or easements or whatever, we are seeing so many more pieces of property being brought to us. So there's been a significant acceleration over the last year and a half in terms of how many properties we're looking at from willing sellers. So it's pretty exciting. And I don't know if we'll get to 30 by 30, but we're really moving.
Moving forward.
We're actually
Yeah.
not gonna be, I don't know, we may not be too far off, particularly when we start looking at easements and things like that. So, which the land trust has always done. But, you know, if we think of it that way, there's ways to conserve land that don't involve just buying the land.
Right.
But easements cost money too. I mean, people have a right to get some value out of the land if they're not gonna be able to.
Heard of a meeting that ended.
An hour early.
Well done.
Just shows that we were in a good place before this meeting, so, and I think the comments were helpful, a lot of the comments were helpful, and so we were able to easily incorporate them. Yep. All right, well, we hope to see you all on March 5th then for the town council workshop, and I will, if there's anything we need from this group between now and then, I will reach out. And if there's anything else that comes out or anything you forgot in this meeting, feel free to reach out to us also. Yep. Thanks all.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.